सेव किया था ना?
मैं सिर्फ इसलिए गया था क्योंकि उसने मुझे कॉल किया, that's it. But listen though.
Save it for someone else.
जिंदगी में सेव करना जरूरी है, मगर जब बात पैसों की हो, सिर्फ सेविंग से काम नहीं चलेगा। इक्विटी म्यूचुअल फंड्स में इन्वेस्ट कीजिए और अपने सेविंग्स को आगे बढ़ने का मौका दीजिए।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
In this episode of Macrosutra, we're going to come back to a crowd favorite, which is cryptocurrencies, or should I say crypto assets, because there are some interesting things that are happening in a lot of emerging economies. And that's what we're going to talk about in this episode. Is there a resurgence of the adoption of crypto assets in emerging economies, and what's driving it? I'm TCA Sharad Raghavan, Deputy Editor at ThePrint, and we have with us Radhika Pandey, a Senior Fellow at NIPFP. Thank you so much, Radhika, for coming again.
Thank you, Sharad.
Now, Radhika, before we start, I mentioned cryptocurrencies and I said crypto assets, and that actually is the core question. Is this adoption happening, cryptocurrencies as a mode of transactions, as in as a currency, or is it happening as a mode of investment, as an asset?
It's happening both ways, and there are different situations and circumstances that are driving. And it's also a function of what is the regulatory framework in different countries. In a lot of countries, cryptocurrencies has been allowed as a means of payment, though it is not a legal tender. So that is a fine distinction within currency also, or within a means of payment, that it is not a legal tender, but if you and I want to transact, we can do in cryptocurrency. So that is allowed in some countries, notably in Japan, it is allowed. They have given a list of cryptocurrencies within which transactions are possible between citizens. So that is one element. The other is cryptocurrencies are allowed as asset, and which is where most of the demand comes up in many countries, that cryptocurrencies should be allowed as an asset. There should be a framework, regulatory framework, or a infrastructure like we have for equities or bonds. There should be a framework for in the form of exchanges, settlement, wallets, which is required for transacting cryptocurrencies. In a lot of countries, cryptocurrencies are being used as a form of asset, and therefore the broader term is crypto asset, which is an all-pervasive term which includes cryptocurrencies, which also includes stable coins, and within stable coins also there are a number of categories. So it is becoming a more broader term, and depending on the use cases and depending on the regulatory framework in different countries, different kinds of uses are seen. And in some countries, it is the economic conditions of those countries that are driving people towards cryptocurrencies. So, for example, we can talk about those in detail, but in some countries, particularly now we are seeing in Sri Lanka and Pakistan, in the midst of economic uncertainty, we have seen a lot of interest towards cryptocurrencies. Some are moving towards cryptocurrency as a gaming option, because there are a lot of blockchain-based games, which are kind of play-to-earn games, where you earn also. It's not just a mode of entertainment, you are earning also. That is driving a lot of people, especially the younger generation, towards cryptocurrencies.
I see.
So we have what is called a adoption index, which is released by an American blockchain firm called Chainalysis, where it provides every year the ranking comes, which shows what is the adoption by different countries, and it shows that India is now at number 4. Vietnam is number 1, then Philippines, Ukraine, and India. So, but if you look at the top 20 countries, it's mostly the emerging economies. So we are seeing a lot of, our discussion is about this. So there is a lot of resurgence of interest in cryptocurrencies, particularly after COVID and due to economic challenges due to the Russia-Ukraine war. There are a lot of, the adoption of cryptocurrency has gained a faster pace.
Right. And so now you mentioned this very interesting term, stable coins.
Yes.
The big fear amongst regulators when it comes to cryptocurrencies is that it's not pegged to any asset. And so its value is just purely speculative. And so then there was this emergence of a thing called stable coins. But there are risks to that as well. And so Radhika, if you could tell us a little more, what are stable coins? What are the risks with them as well?
So as you rightly mentioned, cryptocurrencies are speculative because they don't have an intrinsic value. So to address that concern, another kind of cryptocurrency has emerged, which is stablecoin.
Right.
Where, as the name suggests, it is more stable because it is the coin or the token or the asset is pegged to certain assets. They may be like US dollar,
Right.
they may be a basket of currencies. That underlying could be gold, or it could be government bond, it could be corporate bonds, commercial papers, or a basket of all these things.
Right.
So it is the value of coin is not something speculative. It is pegged to the value of the underlying reserve assets.
So real
that
world
is-
assets.
Real world assets,
Yeah.
yes. So that is stable coin. But again, in stablecoin, there are two broad categories. One is asset-backed stablecoins, which is what we just spoke about, where they are backed by certain assets. There could be, as we mentioned, some
Gold,
currencies
dollar.
or basket of currencies or bonds. But there's another kind which is flourishing, which is called algorithmic stablecoin,
Right.
where the demand and supply of this stable coin is determined by some rules, certain rules
Right.
which are ingrained in the algorithm through smart contracts. So there is a target, say 1 unit of a stable coin is pegged to $1. Now, if this peg is gets disturbed, suppose the value of stable coin becomes lesser than the value of dollar because
Right.
there's excess supply, then the algorithm will run in a manner that some stable coins are burnt. That means their
I
supply
see.
is reduced.
Okay.
On the other hand, if the value of this stable coin rises above the dollar, this 1:1 peg is again disturbed, then more coins are minted. So either they are minted or they are burnt, depending on how the demand supply balance has to be maintained.
Right.
So that is algorithmic, which is very complicated, and we have seen a lot of examples of collapse of this kind of algorithmic stable coin. But even within asset-backed stable coins, there are a lot of risks, which recently an IMF paper has pointed out. So as part of the G20, IMF came up with a note on macro financial implications of crypto assets.
Right.
And there they have talked about stable coins in detail as a separate category. And they say that, this reserve, whatever is the reserve composition, it may be that it's not disclosed properly to the investor. So all the investor protection concerns
see.
may arise because here we do not have a regulator. There's no SEBI-like regulator to ensure that you are getting proper disclosure.
There's no transparency.
There's no transparency. You do not know whether the reserves are actually within the custody of the issuer, because normally that is what's supposed to be done. Because if you're holding stable coin,
Right.
and if it is pegged to $1, if you want to redeem, you should be getting $1 in
back.
exchange
Yeah.
for it. But the redemption rules may not be clear, the disclosure norms may not be clear, and that creates a problem. One of such stablecoin is called US Tether,
Yes.
which is widely used. It has one of the most maximum market capitalization, one of the most prominent stable coin. But here also we faced a problem. In late 2021, the American commodities market regulator had to penalize the issuer of Tether because they had not disclosed it properly.
Right.
So those are the kind of issues that are discussed in the IMF FSB BIS paper. So generally what is understood is that stable coins are more stable, and therefore emerging economies are seeing a lot of interest, but it needs to be the risks need to be understood.
Right.
And in the current geopolitical situation, these risks are even getting more prominent, and we can talk about those later, like during SVB collapse.
Right. Exactly.
The Circle is a company which issues stable coins called the USD coin.
Right.
Now, USD coin is again pegged to dollars, and all those deposits were in Silicon Valley Bank,
Which then collapsed.
and therefore the USD coin also market capitalization crashed in a single day.
Yeah.
So there are these linkages between core financial system and stable coin. Within stable coin, the reserve composition needs to be understood. So these are some of the risks with the system.
So, I mean, broadly, these are the kind of issues you have, right? You have Are cryptocurrencies, are you looking at them as a currency? Are you looking at them as assets? And within currencies or assets, you have things like stablecoins and other cryptocurrencies. Stablecoins came in because they tried to, do away with the volatility of conventional cryptocurrencies. But the core fact that there is no regulator seems to still be a problem. But regardless, there seems to be adoption happening in emerging markets. And so, Radhika, could you tell us, what are the driving reasons? There are different reasons for different countries,
different
right?
reasons for different countries, and they are very interesting. So, if we look at one lot of countries that are the Latin American countries, for example, we look at Argentina, we look at Venezuela, we look at Peru. These countries are facing very high inflation rate.
Right.
In fact, they are facing something which is called hyperinflation, where year-on-year or annual inflation is above 100%. So when inflation is very high, the purchasing power of the local currency plummets to a very low level. And therefore, even to buy a very small item, you have to bring a stash of coins or cash to exchange to get your commodity. So that has resulted in a loss of faith or trust by the citizens in their own local currency. So, and at the same time, whenever there is a inflation, very high inflation, it also leads to depreciation of the currency. The value of the currency also starts to decline. So these two reasons have resulted in people moving away from their own currency and moving to, say, either commodities like gold or US dollar. And now, due to the proliferation of cryptocurrencies, they are moving to dollar-backed stable coins.
Right.
There was a survey conducted by MasterCard late last year, which found that 1/3 of population in Latin American countries are using dollar-backed stable coins for day-to-day purchases.
Oh, wow.
For day-to-day transactions. So it is that you can see it's become that prominent. And not only that, even in, for example, in Argentina, the small cities or districts are launching their own local cryptocurrency to do their regular day-to-day transaction. So these like closed loop tokens, which we say. Right. So they are coming up with these new kinds of instruments for their means of transactions every day.
So I was going to actually ask then, is this adoption over there, is it state backed, or are these just people who are doing that?
This is people there who are doing that, and because there's no regulatory framework. Right. It's only on May 4th that Argentina has banned the use of cryptocurrencies. In fact, it has asked its regulated entities like banks, etc., to not offer crypto asset related transaction, not use them for like custodial services and other services related to cryptocurrency. So
like the RBI tried to do in India for commercial banks, that they told them not to relate to or initiate any transaction related to cryptocurrencies. But it is creating a lot of opposition in that country. So let us see how it goes. But the fact is that unless the underlying reasons are addressed, that inflation comes down, macroeconomic challenges are addressed. So until that happens, there is going to be interest in these countries. So that is one driver, that is high inflation and devaluation of currency. The other is that in countries where there are very stringent capital controls, where there are restrictions on the inflow and outflow of capital, foreign capital coming in, domestic capital going out. There also cryptocurrencies are being used to evade capital controls. So that would be like Russia?
That is like Russia. That is like China, where China has very stringent capital control. So there was a very interesting incident reported where Chinese traders in Russia are remitting their earnings to Russia using stable coins.
I see.
So a lot of remittance is happening, because then you can evade capital controls, you can evade taxation, because there are these online exchange platforms available, or even closed loop Facebook platforms available, which offer these services of converting cryptocurrencies or stable coins to fiat currency. So these are flourishing as another use case And lastly, in Vietnam is number one country in terms of adoption in 2022. And there we are seeing there are two main reasons. One is gaming. All the prominent blockchain gaming platforms have set up their entities there. And the second thing is that the banking facilities are not well developed. So there's a lot of financial exclusion there, and their decentralized finance is being used to provide banking activities to people.
Okay.
So that is another driver of adoption of cryptocurrencies.
So now, I mean, we have to then do a recap of where India stands on these things. So number one, our regulations don't touch cryptocurrencies as currency at all, right? All of it has to do with the asset because we tax it as an asset.
Right.
But the driving forces, as you have mentioned in all of these other countries, it's, very high inflation, hyperinflation, or a huge devaluation of currency, or very strict capital controls,
Right.
or an underdeveloped banking system. None of that seems to be the case in India. We're in a strong position. So do you see that our adoption is going to grow at the same pace as these other emerging economies?
So if you look at the crypto adoption index, India stands fourth. It has slipped 2 places in 2022. But here in India, it's not used as a means of payment. Like in what we saw in Latin American countries, it's being used as a means of payment because it's used as a currency.
Over there. Yeah.
But in India, it is being used as an asset.
Right.
It is being used to gain, to have speculative gains, just like any individual wants to diversify her portfolio by investing in equities, bonds, gold. They will also want to invest in cryptocurrencies. So here, the main interest is not arising in the form of payment or the means of payment because of all those macro challenges, but it is definitely being seen as another means, another asset for portfolio diversification and for earning returns, particularly in a situation where when interest rates are lower, then you see there is a greater attraction towards cryptocurrencies because the return on bond may be low.
Yeah.
So it is taken as a competitive asset, just like equities, bonds, where people try to assess, okay, how much they want to put in here, whether the returns are more favorable, taking into account all the risks, because it's typically is the younger generation who invests in cryptocurrencies, and they do understand the risks also. There are consumer protection concerns, there are investor protection concerns, but when people are investing, to some extent, they do understand that there are risks involved, but then also they are investing in cryptocurrencies, particularly in India, as a means of asset.
Right. And the Finance Ministry and the RBI have both been very clear that there are very big risks in investing in cryptocurrencies, and investors have to beware. You're doing so at your own risk, because there is no then place that you can go saying, oh, I got defrauded. There's no regulator. There's no grievance addressal mechanism. So you're on your own.
Yeah. The only point here is whether they need to be banned or not, because that is again a very contentious issue, because banning also does not always help.
Yes.
That we have seen in China. China banned cryptocurrencies in various use cases. It banned crypto mining also, but then also we are seeing it is amongst one of the prominent adopters of cryptocurrency.
Yep.
So whether it should be banned or should be regulated, that is the next level of question. And I think on that question, a lot of discussion is going on also as a part of G20 platform, that what should be an ideal contour of a regulatory framework for cryptocurrencies, which is uniform across all countries and not just one, because unless people are, the countries are on the same page, because if I earn and I remit to another country which is more crypto friendly, then the purpose is not solved.
Absolutely.
So there are various modes of discussion happening alongside different platforms to come up with some discussion or some consensus around what should be the regulatory framework.
Yeah, I mean, the finance minister has also said this. I think she, in the last parliament session, in reply to a question, she had said that we'll come up with regulations when there is agreement globally on what shape these regulations should take. And I think India is using its G20 presidency. One of the areas of discussion is this. So maybe, what do you know, maybe in over this year, we're going to actually see some regulation on cryptocurrencies. But on cryptos as currencies, we actually have a bunch of questions from our audience. It's not so much as crypto as investment destinations, but more as currencies. So one of the questions is, do you think if crypto is finally recognized by major economies around the world as a mode of transfer of money, this would further reduce the volume of cash transactions, just like UPI has been doing?
Yeah, so again, coming back to examples of countries which we saw with the Latin American countries,
Right.
there, because of the greater use of dollar-backed stablecoin, the risk that has emerged is that there is a greater move towards currency substitution, because people are moving away from their local currency and they are moving to dollar, they are moving to dollar-backed stablecoin. So on the one side, we are talking about de-dollarization, but dollar-backed stablecoin is promoting something called dollarization. So when you have a greater proliferation of not as a legal tender but as cryptocurrencies as a means of transaction, the risk that it leads to is that it leads to cryptoization, it leads to dollarization, it leads to capital outflows because you can take your money out, so you are evading capital control. So those are the risks that arise. And as regards legal tender is concerned, I don't think in India we are moving towards that direction.
Yeah.
Even if we come up with a regulatory framework, that will be for regulating it as an asset, where we will have a framework for recognized cryptocurrency exchanges. We will have some prudential requirements as to how to, distinguish between the client money and the proprietor money, so that all those scams that we have seen recently,
Yes.
the FTX collapse, Terra Luna collapse, those kind of things do not happen. And also there's greater emphasis towards consumer protection, investor protection. So those are the elements of regulatory framework that we will see. As regards legal tender, I think we are moving more towards CBDC, the central bank digital
I was going to mention, yes.
currency, where we have already seen that RBI has done pilots of both wholesale-based CBDC
And
as well as retail-based CBDC. So I think there we are moving much faster, so that we can address the concerns of cryptocurrency being used as a means of payment. So there, the discussion should be whether CBDC would have a competition with cash and UPI kind of transactions or Paytm kind of transactions.
Right.
But not for cryptocurrencies, because they will not be used as a legal tender. In fact, I think only in one country, El Salvador, only in 2021, they allowed it as a legal tender, just like dollar, because there the situation is bad, their currency is not doing well. So that is why. So those are not the conditions that we see happening anytime soon in India.
Now, when I think it was 2 budgets ago, the finance minister announced that she was going to be taxing crypto assets. There'll be a TDS and there would be a tax on profits. I think that caused a lot of discomfort amongst people investing in cryptocurrencies. So one of our questions is relating to that, which is cryptocurrencies, if they do become legal tender, will the capital gains tax and TDS be applicable anymore? Because now it's a legal tender. But I don't think it'll become a legal tender, right?
Again, so it's the 30% tax is now imposed on virtual digital assets. So as per the budget, there's a 30% tax on virtual digital asset transactions. So that's a capital gains tax whenever we make capital gains.
Right.
And we cannot offset against the loss that we make, like which is what we see in some of the other transactions, the non-VDA or non-virtual digital assets transaction. So the main intent seems to be that unless we have a regulatory framework, we are using taxation as a means to firstly identify people who are using virtual digital assets, and also to kind of discourage, because 30% is too high, a tax without the offsetting clause also. So that is the policy intent that seems to be behind this move, which was opposed by a lot of crypto exchanges in India, and they said that this will kill their business and it will lead to migration of business to other countries.
But it clearly hasn't, right? If our adoption is still fourth highest.
Yes, it hasn't. So that is the point here. But again, we have to make a very clear-cut distinction between crypto being used for different use cases, like it's being used for means of payment. Within means of payment also, will it be like a private currency or will it be a legal tender? And then whether it is as an asset. So most closely we envisage that cryptocurrencies in India, if we have a regulatory framework, would be allowed as an asset.
Right. And so now our final question is to do with one of the concerns that even the government has raised, which is that cryptocurrencies can be used for things like terror financing.
Right.
So I'm guessing that the discussions in the G20 will have to do with this as well, this aspect.
Yes, definitely. So as I mentioned, IMF has come up with a recent note because there was a meeting of the G20 members, representatives in January this year. And after that, IMF was requested to come up with a paper summarizing or a report summarizing the discussion of the various members that is available on public domain. So there they have raised these concerns. Many countries have raised these concerns about money laundering, terror financing, evasion of capital controls.
Right.
So there the legislative amendment legislations need to be strengthened to address these kind of transactions. Again, there's a challenge because there's things like dark web where a lot of transactions happen, and how far, what is the capacity, regulatory capacity and the capacity of the players involved in this ecosystem to evade those laws. That will also determine how far we go in this direction because the technology is fast evolving every day. As we see, decentralized finance was not known 2 years back, and now decentralized finance is serving the role of a bank. It is providing insurance services, it's providing payment services. So it's removing the need for centralized financial institutions in a number of countries. That is what we've seen in Vietnam. So the technology and regulation need to move in tandem to ensure that we have an optimum outcome rather than a suboptimal outcome.
Right. And so, I mean, that's what we have right now. We are seeing crypto assets being adopted increasingly in emerging economies. In some emerging economies like the Latin American ones, it's because of hyperinflation. And so people are fleeing to cryptocurrencies, putting their money there. In countries like Russia, China, it's because of capital controls and the ability of crypto assets to evade these capital controls. So people are putting money in these assets there. In Vietnam, they're using this as an alternative to their banking system because the banking system is not that developed. And then we have Pakistan and Sri Lanka where these economies are not doing that well. And so people are again looking for safe places or relatively safe places to put their money. India doesn't have any of these problems. Our banking system is strong. Our inflation is stable. You might say it's high, but if you compare it to Latin America, our inflation is very, very low. We don't have such strict capital controls either. And our economy is in a strong place. Yet, adoption is rising. So India is using its G20 presidency to kind of push for an international agreement on regulation. And so that's where we are right now. We can expect this regulation hopefully to come by the end of India's presidency. But up till then, we're going to have to wait and watch. But before you go, I have an appeal to make to you. We at ThePrint, we do a lot of journalism that we are proud of, a lot of reporting, deep reporting that we're proud of. We go to places, we tell you stories that other people don't bring to your notice. But all of this takes time and a lot of effort and a lot of money. And it's in regard to the last one that I make an appeal to you. Please subscribe to ThePrint. The link is in the description of this video. It enables us to do all of this work, to bring all of this news and highly analytical coverage to you. And apart from that, it also gives you several benefits, one of which is that it gets you priority passes to our webinars, which are exclusive for our members. And it also allows you the opportunity to write in to us. You can write an article expressing your own opinion. It's called our Your Turn section. You can write for us. And finally, our editors write these really thoughtful newsletters that go out to our subscribers. And if you subscribe, you'll get these. It's an insight into how our editors are thinking about various news topics, what pieces of news they think are interesting. So please do subscribe. As I said, the link is in the description of this video. And thank you so much for watching.